All right, so we're back. We are here for the fourth session now. Um, so just I saw that you submitted the homework from the last practices. Anything you just want to share about, going through that homework itself, or even from the last week?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting the definitions of those essence words was great. Um, Doing the pictures and stuff, I haven't completely finished up. I've got a bunch of pictures kind of collected. I was going to set them up for like revolving wallpaper on my computer, but um, got some really good quotes with some pictures and stuff for each one of those things, or kind of definitions. So that was a cool added thing. At first, it didn't seem like it'd make that much of a difference, but it
Mm,
um, really made it, was turned out to be kind of a cool part of that exercise. One of the things, like, let's see as I go through, one of the things I probably have struggled with this week, and it's just kind of been a wild week, just kind of a trying to find structure right now. There's a lot of changes going on in my life, trying to figure out things that have to be dealt with that are kind of come up. So, trying to find a good structure for those things, but then, um, feeling the essence of others is probably one of the things I was struggling with the most to really get into and really feel like I was doing that well.
hmm
Um, and then yeah, working on the areas of possibility was a little more challenging than I thought it was going to be. Um, Again, what's I think really hard for me right now is just so much of my world that I've had kind of gotten, I'm not going to say turned upside down, but the structure of my life is very open-ended right now. And so it's hard to know. I mean, which it puts creates a great place to make changes because there's not a lot of structure there, but they're so open-ended that it's a little hard to be like,
mm,
pick a direction to go.
hmm
Did the possibilities, I guess, I feel like are so, you know, open-ended. And my daughter made a comment. I kind of was talking to her what she wanted to do, my oldest daughter, and she's like, I kind of want to live off grid and do that kind of thing. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, we could do that together if we wanted to. Like, I'm at a place right now where, with my youngest kid's mom wanting to move to Hawaii with probably the younger two girls, and my older two here, my youngest son, just kind of a lot of possibility, and it's hard to know like what even direction to start trying to go. And so um, it's weird to have so much possibility and make it hard to make possibility from that. But
sure.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, um, just from reading what you wrote down, I was like, oh, this is excellent. Like great job in practicing because, I would say even again, not that it's not there, but as you've spoken to, in our last few sessions around like, hey, there are times that I kind of just feel like I'm in this survival state. And I know you to be somebody who is connected to possibility, but then actually sitting down and doing it like you're speaking to, I would say it's very natural that as you write it down and you're with all this possibility and there's not necessarily like tangibility to it in this moment as you're speaking to, what does that drive up for you? What do you feel in those moments when you're like, okay, I can see the possibility and what do I even do with it?
I think like one of the things I'm struggling with is that still being stuck in that kind of survival state so badly. I mean, just even like in the last week, I've got a couple motorcycles that I'm trying to sell. And this happened, I think I mentioned it before a month or so ago. I got it out, got it running for the summer, hadn't had it started in over a year. Took it out, rode it for like 5 minutes, and for some reason it didn't get oil to the part of the motor and it blew up the motor. And it was just like,
Mm,
well, that sucks. And then the other one, I was kind of on the fence whether I was going to sell it or not. I took it out yesterday, ran out of gas, had some issues. I thought it was ready to sell. And so there's just a lot of like, not huge, like
Mm,
heartbreaking moments in life, not like
mm.
going through my divorce or whatever, but just a lot of little things where it's like, man, I thought this was going to be an easy, like, had this one done, just a quick take it out for a spin, make sure it's ready to list up and sell. And it just has more problems. And so that's where I feel like a lot of the things, it's like, yeah, these are great ideas, but feeling like there's so many hurdles that have to be jumped over to get to those places for that to happen.
Sure. And okay, so and again, we might want to potentially open this up as the bigger coaching conversation today, but okay. So as we go to, I'm just going to bring up like um any of these, right? Like walking through floor plans, taking a vacation to the mountains, uh continued education in psychology, continued education in business. This is where you want to start getting present to is your body, is your nervous system already, in a sense, like foreseeing struggle or hurdles with those things? And then it just keeps you from fully just moving towards the possibility.
Yeah, I think that's probably just that. Like I said, I mean, there's there's so many things that I've run into over the years that have been roadblocks and hurdles that I've had to push past, you know. And so, and currently, I mean, there's a ton of them. I found out too this week that my grandma isn't doing well. Looks like she probably will pass away soon. And so there's just a lot of like heavy things right now in life. So it's
Yes.
like I said, the options and the possibilities huge, but I've also got these big um heavy, weighty items that are really weighing down right in front of me. You know, some decisions
Sure.
with my daughters and what's going to go on there. You know, my grandma passing, which is kind of the last family member that I was really close to that's still alive. And so just a lot of those like weighty things. And it's like, yeah, I want to build, I want to create possibility, but I also feel like there's these problems, these weighty items on the table that really need not to stop me from exploring those things, but I do feel like that needs to be cleared off my plate to be able to really focus and enjoy those bigger possibilities and options.
Yeah. And so even, again, as a place just to sort of anchor to before we move into the bigger coaching conversation is like, well, how do you want to be about these heavy, burdensome things that you struggle with in life?
But yeah, I mean, I think going, you know, overcoming those things. And I mean, I think those are in a lighter way. I mean, to not put so much pressure, to not let it put the brakes on everything else in life, but um, to yeah, I mean, it's one of those things too that's hard because it's a lot of these things, especially with stuff with my daughters. Like, I want to be at cause at these things, but you got so many
Hmm.
emotions and feelings and other people and involved there. So it's like, I want to be decisive. I want to show some leadership, but yet you're dealing with emotions that need to be worked through. You're dealing with other people in such a deep level there that it's not like, it's not like a business type thing where if an employee is not performing, it's like, all right, dude, you got to step up to the line or you're out. I mean, what do you tell your daughters when they're on the fence of whether they want to see you again in their life? Like, what,
Sure.
how do you pressure, like, move that along? What choice, conversations are had there? How do you do that? So, I mean, I look at all these things, I guess, to a certain degree as opportunities. And yeah, they're hurdles, but they're also exercises for bigger possibility. I mean, I was thinking about it today, like, or just in the last few days, like, okay, so you got these hurdles, but these are possibilities, these are options to look at ways to one, handle differently than I have in the past, and to really show up in a completely different way in. But at the same time, like, how do you do that on a practical level, especially when it's not like, you know, obviously making time to go see my grandma before she passes away.
Yes.
That's a big one. That's easy. You can do that. But some of those more difficult things, like even the, stuff with the motorcycles, like they're silly examples, kind of, but it's very frustrating because it's like, I checked the oil, made sure everything was good, should have been good. It's just a fluke thing that
Hmm.
threw everything off. So, I think with those things, like how do you overcome those hurdles where there's so many external influence? How do you plan around that? How do you stick to that integrity and some of those things?
Sure. Okay, so let's pause here at the crossroads and check, right? Because do you feel like this could be our bigger coaching conversation today or
Y- Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Um okay, so let's just take a quick pause here then as I said that again and just is there any grounding or any meditation that you need to do today or do you feel like we can just continue to dive into the
I think we
topic?
can dive right into this. Yeah.
Okay. Um just want to make one note.
Because I think there's something to be said about this whole situation. I mean, these borderline uncontrollable things. I mean, I'm not going to say
Mm-hmm.
to a certain degree, yes. I mean, well, okay. Looking at business for the last 6 months, we went into winter with five jobs basically in the bag. Like for sure, want you to do this work. One guy died, one guy's wife lost her job, another guy backed out, kind of a big integrity drop on his part. And, he signed a contract agreeing to make a payment, didn't do that. Um, and so how do you, so it's an issue in business. You're always dealing with interpersonal things. And so
Mm-hmm.
how do you draw people to that place when especially when there's a lot of stubbornness? I mean, a great example would be like my ex-wife, like with the kids, and where she's got some pretty strong narcissistic tendencies. She's done a lot of work to create break down the relationship with my daughters, where it's just constantly your dad's this monster, he's a horrible person, you're better off without him, he's manipulating you. How do you deal with all those things? And so you run
Sure.
into that with customers. I mean, I've had customers in the past where, you know, they're do a very clear contract, but they're not happy with how it turned out. And it's like, well, it's on the blueprint, and they just won't accept reality. I mean, I think that's kind of the struggle is when people are just not being logical, when they're being highly emotional, and it's very clear and cut and dried. Like, and then you get into these situations where there's these roadblocks, and like, what do you do? How do you overcome those?
Sure. Well, and in a sense, it really has us look at like, okay, well, who do you want to be in these situations? Again, even if we just come back to that base question of like, we take all these situations, your daughters, your ex-wife, your customers, um, just those, and we connect them to yeah, there's struggles, there's interpersonal issues that happen in all those dynamics. And where do you want to go with that, David? Like who do you coming back to that question that I asked, like who do you want to be in the face of all of that?
Right. So, I mean, I think there's ultimately a leader in that and
Mm-hmm.
leading those things. And that's, I think, where I struggle is when there's so much pushback. Like, how do you effectively lead in
Mm.
that to, I mean, especially when it's against very difficult, very stubborn, we're not you going to use logic at all. It's going to be all emotional situations. Um, you know, so how do you overcome that? Like, that's where I'm
Yeah.
struggling probably the most is like, yeah, I want to show up. I want to help people make decisions, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so many emotions there
Mm.
that are, I guess, uncontrollable, really, on my part.
Okay.
how do you, especially like with my daughters, where they've gotten all these things, they're told by their mom. They're highly, terribly confused. They don't know what to believe.
Hmm.
And so I don't want to just railroad it or, steamroll into them and just be like, your feelings are all wrong. But they are. I mean, they're incorrect, logically, factually incorrect feelings and beliefs that were planted in their mind by someone else. But how do you help overcome that and lead that?
Sure. Yep. And okay, so really good, right? Because we want to again connect to like the desire here is to be an effective leader.
Hmm.
I would just this that an effective leader that can enroll others in the face of resistance. That's what you're up
Hmm.
to here.
Yeah.
And you're already speaking to one of the things that gets in the way is emotion.
Yep.
And where we also want to get present to is where else is that gap for you, right? So, in becoming that effective and enrolling leader, what gets in the way?
Well, I think just probably helping people see the the facts, the logic, the realities of the situation.
Hmm.
Like, you can try to explain those things and you can, you know, um, but how do you really help, especially children? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
there's things with like my ex-wife. There's just boundaries. I mean, she wanted an answer in 7 days from getting back from Hawaii, whether she could go back to Hawaii, and I'm like, we're not doing it. Like, that's just not my goal.
Hmm.
Sorry, our goals don't align. We can talk about it, but it's not going to be a quick make a quick. This isn't a hasty decision we're going to make, and just really holding to that and setting that space there, like that's a little easier. Um, but I mean, like, there's a lot of frustration right now with just a lot of things, business wise, personal life, and even with business stuff. Like, been trying to have this conversation with my coworker for months about just setting some more structure and some of those things. And it's like feeling like it goes in one ear and out the other. And it's like, am I not communicating properly? Is
Mm.
that a failure on my part? Or is there like, how do you, to a certain extent, I think it's not so much a failure on my part or poor communication as it is probably an unwillingness to make changes on the other party. And so then what do you do? Those
Sure.
situations. I mean, there again, my coworker, I have a hard decision because we're really good friends. We're really made a commitment to each other to be there for each other, to support each other. But then when I try to give support, sometimes it's not received. So what do you do? How do you hold that a person accountable to, hey, you put me in your life to hold you
Hmm.
accountable, to support you. You're refusing that support. I mean, that showed up with the No More Mr. Nice Guy group that I was doing. Like, a guy asked for accountability, and then when I tried to provide that accountability, this isn't working for me, I went out. Well, how hard do you push?
Sure.
Um, but then there's things like with my ex-wife, there's a certain level till the kids are 18. That's always going to be a strife. There's always going to be contention there. That's going to be difficult. Like, at a certain point, you got to get a judge involved to make a ruling on this because it's not just a simple like we're not going to ever agree on what's best for the kids. Unfortunately, that's just
Hmm.
we can try, but her
Are
direction
you
in
okay
life
if I
is
pause you
so
here for a
far.
sec?
Hmm.
Okay, so really good. And one thing I want to highlight in this too is like, okay, so some of the gaps that we're speaking to are uncontrolled emotions.
Yep.
Um, Potentially that people aren't following, just people aren't following the leadership that you're bringing or what you're putting into the space. Um, you did highlight there could be an issue with your communication. And subtly, I would say there is a questioning of self.
Hmm.
Again, even when it comes to like, let's say that guy with accountability, like how hard do I push versus how hard don't I push, right? And very subtly, what's there, and you probably can see it too, is that I would say one of the gaps that's in the way for you is the actual interpretation of the relationship, right? Because you're speaking about just the facts, right? So we can speak about with your coworker. Yeah, the facts should be spoken to, hands down, right? Just clear facts. Yet there is a relationship right there. And my bet of it, my hunch of it is that your interpretation of the relationship, just the fact that the two of you are in this friendship together, it can kind of muddy the waters a bit in terms of your effective leadership.
Hmm.
Would that be
Absolutely. Yeah.
so? Would that
Yep.
be fair?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, and that's where like it's complicated in that, but I think you're right because it comes from a place like, for one, I'm older than him. Not that it's a huge difference, but six years older than him.
Hmm.
He's in his early 30s. I'm in my late 30s. So, I mean, I look at where he's at. He just had a kid about the same time I had my last kid. And I look back and I'm like, it's not very many years, but I can tell you the mistakes you're going to make in the next 6 years because you're on the same
Sure.
path that I am. And I try to point those out, and it's kind of like, no, you don't understand. I got it figured out already. And it's like, that's what I thought when I was 30, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
Like, and so there's some of that too, where I know it's part of its personality too.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on what is it a friendship? Is it an accountability? Is it a business partnership? Like, what is our friendship? And we've had conversations about that. Like, are we friends? Are we business partner? Like, strictly business, cutthroat business relationship? Is this a friendship? Like, and we've agreed, like, friendship comes above all. Like, if
Hmm.
business starts to cut into where we're getting pissed off at each other, all right, we're no longer working together because our friendship comes before helping each other really in business.
But is that true? Because right here, you're speaking to that there is this, sort of, he's not following through on a discussion that you wanted to have with him. And yet, you're still in business. You're
Right.
still going down that path, right? So, yes, verbally, you've spoken to like, hey, if there's a business issue here, we'll friendship first. So we'll just we'll cut the business ties. And yet, I don't actually hear that happening.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's true. And that's where, again, it's a tricky to define what that means because does that mean, because for him, he's like, his business for him is above all. I mean, that's before family, that's for anything.
Hmm.
And so how do you cut that as a friend? Because I think for him, if I cut and go, hey, business is out, he's going to go, well, then, I mean, I thought you were a friend that had my back in business. Well, so what does that look like when it really comes down to friendship before business? If I say, hey, I'm out on the business side, is that going to offend you? Is that going to hurt you? Feel betrayed, rejected, stepped away from as a friend? And can we still be friends if that truly happens?
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you notice? Like this is the place, right? Because where do you get stopped?
I think navigating those conversations,
Hmm.
like, they start down that road, and I try to. And I get frustrated even in the moment. Like this conversation is not going the direction I want it to. Why is this like I'm saying things, and again, it's feel like it's in one ear and out the other, and not actually being
Yes.
received.
Yes. And are you talking to that? Are you speaking to that? That person is listening to you, but it's a lot of noise.
Right? Probably not, and that's probably where the breakdown really comes from.
Sure. So just from what we've discussed so far in terms of the gaps of your effective leadership, what are you present to right now?
I think the biggest thing is just confronting what I'm saying is not being received. And, I
Mm,
guess, do you take that to a point of, I don't know if it's my if I'm not communicating this properly, I don't know if you're not receiving it, but what I'm saying is not being received. Just really simply is that, like, we're not communicating what I'm saying isn't being properly communicated here.
yeah, absolutely. And um, I'll connect it to a potential bigger thread of conversation in that um, why do you stop in the pursuit of creating what you want?
Frustration plays a part, but I think there's a deeper thing going on there, which is probably either one, not holding my desires high enough,
Hmm.
or two, not wanting to be pushy on, like, because I see myself do that. I mean, like, I'll go create what I want to create by myself. I don't like it. I like having a partner. I like having somebody alongside of me, but I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, either with or without you. And so it's like, if you're not going to be helping me, then get the hell out of my way and let me go do it by myself. But then I end up with very few relationships and very few, um, I'm not enrolling people in those projects in those directions that I'm trying to go. It's just, screw it. If you're not going to help, then get out of my way. And
Hmm.
so, probably comes from a level of lacking belief that I'm right, because it's easier to go out and fail by myself and go, well, nobody's here to watch me fail. I failed. I'll figure it out. I'll
Hmm.
pivot from here. And if really, I don't know, I'm going to use the word demand someone else join you on that
Mm,
errand that you're going on, and then it fails, then it's a lot easier for them to be like, I told you it was a bad idea. You didn't listen to me. And now what I told you happened. And it's, I guess embarrassing, or you feel hurts your ego at that point, where if they say no, it's a bad idea and I still want to try it, I can go do that, but at
sure.
least they're not there to say I told you so.
Okay, so as you're holding this conversation, when you're in these interactions with others where you're potentially leading or enrolling them, is it more of a fear of being pushy, or is it more of a fear of failure? That like,
Failure.
hey, you enroll this person in this, and then they potentially could go downhill with you.
Right. And I think it's more failure. I think I
Ah,
sugarcoat it as being polite, probably nice guy tendency of, you know, that nice, quote unquote, nice guy facade of, I'm not going to be pushy. I'm not that, vacuum
yeah.
salesman that's shoving my beliefs down your throat, or the, guy out pushing religion. It probably comes from not wanting to be that type of religious person from my past. That's, you
Hmm.
have to believe what I believe. So I don't want to be pushy, but like that. But I think at a deeper level, like when I was a kid, I learned to weld on my own. I learned to work on engines by myself because my dad worked third shift. My goal was to have everything I wanted fixed by the time my dad woke up from working overnight. And I didn't want him to help me, because if he helped me, he would always criticize me. He would tell me I'm doing it wrong. And so I think there's really that level of putting that judgment I felt from my dad, which was really my dad, as I've talked to my dad recently, wasn't judgmental. It was him pushing me to achieve more and to do better. But I took it as a kid as just pure judgmental. And so, and when I get somebody else enrolled in with me, it's like, are they going to judge me? Are they going to nitpick me? Are they going to like what, you know? So it's easier to do it alone, or not bring people into that level of closeness to me in a project, because what kind of judgment am I going to get for that?
Mm. Hmm. So that's really what we're dealing with here then is that all these deeper layers, it's the judgment that
Right.
could come across the table at you, whether it's your daughters, your work employee, your coworker, customers,
Customers,
that
yep.
how, if you show up as that leader, you enroll, you stand in that energy, and then whatever dynamics happen, that will then, being that leader, you also have to be with the judgment, the criticism
Hmm.
that could come.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, even like customers, like that's the go-to for people if they don't want to pay their bill, nitpick and judge. Well, this
Hmm.
isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. That's not good enough. I don't owe you your final payment because I'm not happy with the work. And it can be 99.9% perfect, but they're going to find that 0.1% of imperfection to avoid paying their bill
Mm.
on time. And so, I mean, it's comes down to where sometimes there's litigation or, I've gotten really
Yeah.
close to several litigations. And it's not that I didn't do a good job. It's that the customer doesn't want to get their checkbook out. And
Yeah.
so that causes, whatever anxiety or whatever you want to call it in me, like, because I'm checking myself. Did I fail? Did I do it right? Is it perfect? And it's usually the things that I sat there and it was stumped me or I wasn't thrilled with. That part of the job didn't go perfect. So I already have a little bit of doubt in my own mind at that point. And then when the customer brings it up, it's like, well, that's not worth holding $10,000 over my head, but I
Yeah.
can see where you're coming from.
Sure. Well, and what a dynamic, right? Because like on the other side, the concern is that you're going to have judgment and criticism from other, but then on your side, you're also constantly reflecting on, hey, how could I have done this better? How could, maybe how could I have done this job better? So it becomes this perfect dynamic, again, and I can't even fully, connect the dots of it, but it's like you can see the circular pattern in that where it's just feeding into this.
100%. Yeah. Yep.
So,
Well, that probably all
yeah, go
started
ahead.
back when I was a kid. I mean, like I watched my son, he's turning six, his birthday's today, and he turned 16 and he's working on my old truck, changing the transmission on it. And there's things that watching him work on it, he struggles a lot more than I would, you know?
Hmm.
And so I'm sure as a kid, I had this level of like knowing self-doubt, legitimate self-doubt. Like, yeah, I'm not doing it as good as my dad does. My dad shows up and he's just, you know, he can, when he puts something together, it just falls into place. And now my dad's told me, like, he watches me work and he feels like I did as a kid. Like, how do you do it so well? How do you do it so perfect? Like, you
Hmm.
just, when you do it, you're so skilled. And he's, for him, especially being older than, my dad, it's like, it's a weird dynamic for him. And so I'm sure a lot of my self-doubt on, like, is it good enough is still in my head of feeling like that kid that's trying to put something together and struggling.
Yep.
And at the root of that is that like, but you're not now. You're a professional with 20 years of experience. Like, you know, is it perfect? No, the house was out, the foundation's screwed up. You couldn't set the cabinets perfect because the house is screwed up. There's only a certain level, unless they want to doze the house and start from scratch, that you can actually do perfect. But I
Hmm.
know that it's not, the cabinet's not level. Well, the whole house is way out of level. What are you going to do? But
Sure.
I know my part wasn't perfect, even though it's out of my control. And so I think that's
Right.
where I struggle when it comes to bringing that even back to like being at cause, is I can always find a place where I could have done better. And so there's that
Mm.
struggle of like, you know, there's these outside things that I go, well, yeah, but I don't want to use that as an excuse that it's a 200, 150-year-old house that isn't, nothing's level, so the cabinets aren't perfect. Well, that's
Hmm.
not only an excuse. I mean, you can't get it perfect. It's just your foundation that you're building with is wrong.
Right. So, um, as you can see, my brain is sort of like thinking of a couple places to go. But really, what do you see as our work here to do with this? with what we've created to this point in the conversation, what is really here for you to create as a next place
Well, I
for
think,
yourself?
going on a deep level of where my lack of trust in my skill, my decision making, my I mean, and I've struggled with it. Like, it's even funny, my romantic relationships. I have these little like red flag, like something just feels off, and I'm always like, yeah, I mean, don't trust your intuition. Like, you're probably just imagining things. You're probably being overly critical. You're probably being over, whatever reason it might be. And then later, I'm like, yeah, that would have explained why this isn't working. And
Mm,
so, just that deep, deep level of self-doubt, I think that comes from my dad, which I think I scratched the surface or got maybe even most of the way through that of it wasn't that my dad was being critical of me for to put me down or to just be a critical jerk. He was pushing me to my full potential. He
hmm
saw what I had in me as potential. And so I think probably the place to work from is there is always more I can do, but being okay, um, with where I'm at, like yeah, I did my best at the time with what I had to work with. Trusting my decision making, like, and again, that's where I struggled. Like looking at my life right now, there's a whole slew of problems that I have.
hmm
So, like for instance, what right do I have to do coaching to a guy struggling with his marriage? I have three failed marriages. I'm talking to a guy that's been married for 30 years that's has one failed marriage. What advice could I possibly give somebody that's been married for 30 years and had one divorce under his belt? Like, but then realizing like that, but to a certain degree, that gives me all the ability because I have
Sure.
more life experience.
hmm Absolutely. Um, so there's a couple of threads I heard you kind of pulling on there, and even really just creating that pathway for yourself. Or like, I can feel your brain sort of figuring out steps here, which is excellent. Like you can see pathways forward for yourself. Um, what do you think would really make a difference for you in our conversation?
Well, I think you're right. I think we've gotten to a place on this where the easy ones I can unravel now. Like
Mm,
I see where that core, that root problem is, I can unravel that. The ones where you get to, for instance, my probably the biggest one would be like my ex-wife with the kids. Like, and
yeah,
it's like I said, to a certain extent, the judge is going to have to make a ruling. Like that's what
sure.
judges do in family, in divorce, and custody situations, because nobody's going to ever decide. And you have to have that third party, that unbiased judge, come in and make a ruling. But with those type of people, where it's like, is it possible to have a conversation with that person that
Mm,
makes a difference,
yeah.
Um, and to a certain degree, I don't think it really is. And so maybe part of my struggle is feeling defeated in that and just being like,
Mm,
I think as long as my will isn't aligned with her will in life and her direction and her plans, it's never going to be good enough unless I just yes, ma'am to her on everything, which is why our marriage fell apart because I got up to a point and I said, this is not how we're going to do this anymore. And she said, okay, then I'm out. So to a certain degree, I think just accepting that, like, there's
hmm
not going to be any, you know, any agreement. I guess probably the next level of difficult is like with my daughters, like how should I become having conversation with them? Like, I'm confident that my parenting style, that the love that I have for them is what they need, but they can't see that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Um,
the hardest sales pitch to have, kind of like, because I think if you can get that nailed down, you can pull that back to selling a job to a client because
sure.
there's not that level of emotion that there is with your children. I mean, essentially, I need to sell to them the value of the discipline and the correction and the lifestyle that I have in my home.
Okay. And it does come back to the conversation we probably had about 4 or 5 weeks ago around that. Yes, you see a path, right? You see a path of, discipline, structure in your home that could make a difference. But if you can't communicate that, and be mindful of this, I'm not saying this in like a judgmental way to yourself, but like if you can't actually enroll them in that, then that's not leadership, right?
Mhm.
Because it falls flat. So it's getting attuned to what would you actually have to enroll them in to have them engage in something that you see.
Right, and that's where essentially I'm lost at is
Yeah,
what that would be. I mean, I've tried different angles, different ways to come at this with them, and it's to the point where they don't want to talk to me at all.
sure.
Which I know there's some other things going on. I think there's
Of
a lot from
course.
their mom that's no matter what I do, any fraction I make, she's going to work as hard or harder to undo
Yeah.
all those things.
Right. But this is the place to really get present to because what would you have to enroll your daughters in or create with your daughters that has them think differently of the relationship with you? That even like no matter what their mom is planting in their ears, there would be some thread or, connection where they're like, like dad is not that. Dad is a little bit different. And again, I know I didn't communicate that the best, but I get
No,
the
I know what
sense
you're
you understand
saying.
where I'm kind of pointing
I
to.
do, yeah, and I don't know where to even begin on that.
Yeah. Right. So here we are, right? So now we're in that space of the unknown. The thing that I would offer you here is that this is where leadership can get confusing, right? Because you see what could potentially be best for your daughters. And I totally get that. You're probably right in a lot of ways. But the real piece that's here is, do you actually know your daughters? Do you know their needs? Have you listened to what they actually need from you?
Hmm. And I think I have, but
Hmm.
also it's not working. So I guess I struggle
Yeah.
with being confident, really, going back to that confidence
Hmm.
place of I believe I have, but I haven't had that breakthrough either. So
Mm.
what what's missing then?
Yeah.
You know,
So what?
is it one them not being transparent of what they need? Are they saying they need A, but they really need B? You know, like you know, I'm trying to think of well, I mean, my youngest daughter, she says she needs me to admit that I was abusive. So what do you
Hmm.
do there? Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't. So how do you discipline correction was uncomfortable for her. She's been told
Yeah.
by everyone that even her therapist that the way I handled it was abusive. So how do you correct, especially like, yeah, just that. How do you
Yeah.
overcome that?
Right. And we did kind of touch on this a
And
couple weeks ago, right? Where again, it's not speaking to fabrication, right? So we're
right.
not feeding into what didn't happen. But there is a place where whether it's been implanted in her head or she actually feels it, that she feels that you were that way to her. And
Hmm.
so, as a leader, again, still standing for what you know is truth, but how could you meet her where she's at?
Well, I mean, there's two things too, and I don't know if that's the real need. I mean, again, I think
Yeah,
that's the surface level, what she thinks she needs or what her emotional state says she needs. But is that the real need of her heart? Is that what she really needs? I don't think so. But speaking to that, I mean, I tried to share with her, like, hey, there were things with my dad that I felt like my dad was a jerk. And I've
mm-hmm,
gotten older, and one, being a parent, I realized sometimes you're not nice when you're a parent. That's
yeah,
difficult. And I said, on top of that, like, you don't see now and you don't understand that. But at the end of the day, I'm sorry that you see it as
sure,
abuse. Um, and that was the exact conversation I had with her. And it just went back to, I need you to admit you did it. And,
yeah,
um, at that point, it's like, okay, so, and again, I think that's where I don't think she's going to get the closure she thinks. I mean, lie or no lie, I think she's got in her head that hearing I was abusive is going to all of a sudden poof, all of her life problems are over. And it's like,
yep.
was that really help? Like, did that
Okay.
solve that for you?
Right. And again, this is playing in the lines though, right? Because you're right. At the end of the day, if she's like, all I need to hear from you is that you were abusive towards me, well, then that's not going to be created. And that's where you have to be complete with that, is that like
Hmm.
that is not, I'm not willing to admit to that because that's not what happened. And that's where from leadership you have to stand for that. But in that stand, it means that you might not have that relationship with her, right? So
Hmm.
there is that piece there. I want to highlight
Right.
that. But the other
Yep.
side of it that I do feel is a place for you to explore is that what you're creating with her in that dynamic is speaking to the future. So you're basically saying like,
Mm.
um, well, my dad was a jerk at times, and as I've, kind of become an adult, like I've seen, let's say, like both the bad aspects of that and the wisdom in that. But it's
Hmm.
almost like what's being created there is it's a future projection of how she'll feel versus actually
Hmm.
connecting to her in the moment. Because how old is that daughter?
So she's 11.
She's 11.
Yep.
She can't
Right.
connect to what she definitely cannot connect to the future and seeing how your parenting will impact her in the future. She is totally focused on what's happening now. And my bet of it is that if you focus on the now,
Hmm.
again, playing in the lines, speak, the opportunity there is to speak to what's actually occurring in the relationship for the two of you now and enrolling from that place.
Yeah.
So how does that land for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think I think the biggest thing is being present to, just present to the moment. Um, but then, I guess weeding through the comments and the statements. Well, I mean, and now it's to the place where I think, I think I've done that here recently with messages to them, but now it's just they won't respond and
Yeah.
won't have a conversation at all.
Yep. Right.
Um,
Again, it kind of brings this back full circle. What would you need to be complete up until this moment? What
what do you
would you
mean
be
by
able? Yeah.
complete to the moment? So, like moving forward or with the past? Do you mean?
from the past to this moment in terms of what's occurred in the relationship with your daughters?
I think, I mean, to a certain degree, I do believe that I'm complete with that. I mean, there's a lot of unfortunate things that have happened. It is what it is. That's happened. That's not great. Um, I don't have a lot of pain, a lot of I mean, general overall, my biggest sentiment to the whole situation is it's heartbreaking to see how older adults and therapists and people who should know better have fed into this narrative that is inaccurate. And,
Hmm.
to tell an 11-year-old, you're absolute, if you believe your parents abused you, you're 100% right. Your parents abused you. You were abused. You have PTSD from this imaginary abuse. And it's like, it it blows my mind that we went there with her. Like, what? We didn't help solve unweave the struggles. We didn't help
Hmm.
find help. It was just take some pills and accept you have PTSD for whatever you've imagined. Like, what a horrible
Sure.
thing to do to a child. Um,
Yes. And what do you notice in this moment about your completion?
I guess I'm not sure.
Yeah. I would say that you're incomplete with how the therapist, your
Yeah. Yep.
ex-wife, have handled the situation. And here it is, right? Because by being incomplete with that, what is the impact on you?
Well, yeah, I mean, heartbreak, I
Hmm.
mean, just that. And then I think the other thing is really wanting to find them support and help that is beneficial, that isn't just, you know, bad shrink type help,
Sure.
I think that's where it really leaves me. I think that's where I struggle the most with being incomplete with it is what would it look like for my daughter to have legitimate psychological help
Yep.
that isn't just, essentially telling her what she wants to hear right now, like really
Sure.
digging down and working with her.
Right. So in the incompletion with what's occurred, there is a desire to get them help. Totally
Right.
get that. But the actual place to get connected to is, let's just say you're actually even complete with how the therapist or your ex-wife have been to this moment. That in a sense, you're complete with all of it. There's no more weight, there's no more heaviness. What then would you want to create next? What then is the possibility?
Well, I mean, and I guess that's where I'm struggling right now is like, what relationship do I have with them? So, I mean, for myself, there's that level of, I guess I don't know how to get complete fully with children whose lives are fucked up. I mean, just
Yeah.
to put it at that, like she's 11, she has so much life left ahead of her, and it's not going to get better in the trajectory she's on. And like people
Yes.
are just gonna like, well, maybe just let him move to Hawaii and you've done what you can. And it's like, and what do I tell myself? I mean, let's just take this to a full extreme. Like their depression gets so bad they get suicidal, and I get a call from my ex-wife that they killed themselves in Hawaii. Do I go, well, I made the right decision. Let them go to Hawaii where they were gonna be happy. Like,
Yeah.
how do you really get complete on, you know, when it's your children and even not adult children. Like, there's a certain point, I think, when your kids turn 18 and they're kind of adults and they want to go out and make a mess of their life, you kind of got to be like, hey, I did what I could. And I think I guess you can rewind that a little. I have done what I can with the girls to the best of my
Yes.
ability. So there, I mean, to that level, I am complete up to this point. I have done what I can to the best of my ability. The question is, how moving forward do I give up on that? Do I say that's enough, or do I push and try and go to a deeper level then?
Yeah. So I would say, just based on time for today, that a practice to take on here is doing that completion work around how others have contributed to the your daughters and
Hmm.
the behaviors that have manifested. The completion of work is about being complete with other. And I would be curious to see what comes out of that. Do you see the benefit of doing that practice or not? You might not.
Not exactly, no.
Okay.
Because I mean, there's that. Yeah, I guess. I mean, to a certain degree, like,
Thanks for speaking to it. So I'm going to kind of just speak to it because of time. But here's the thing is that I think that what this conversation is showing is that if we expand this outwards, even outside of the relationships with your daughter, is that there are places where you are very complete with yourself and how you've shown up, but the lingering element is other.
hmm
How your coworker has showed up, how your customers have showed up, how the ex-wife has showed up, how your daughters have showed up. That's where you're holding a lot of incompletion is how others are showing up in interrelationship with you.
exactly. Yep.
So can you see, I mean, the easier way to actually take on that completion exercise might be getting complete with how others have impacted your life.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if we come from that angle, can you see the opportunity in doing that work?
Yeah. So how do you tie that with being at cause?
So I would say for now, where we tie this in is that do the completion work.
Hmm.
And again, we can work on this on the Thursday call. We can work on this for next week as well. I don't see this as like a one call type thing, but start with doing those 13 questions of completion. See where you end up. See what shows up for you when you're actually able to declare completion with others. And then from there, in the space of healing the past and being open to creating the future, clean slate, that's where now you want to look at being at cause. From
Yeah.
being complete with other, what does that actually mean for David to lead and enroll others, including his daughters, in the next step? Because you're in an open space, you're not carrying that baggage of the past.
How do you do that when others aren't complete? I mean, they've got so much baggage. So I can come, and I feel like to a, really from a certain degree, I really believe that I am at a place with the girls. Like, yeah, there's the past of it's whatever. They've had poor therapists, they've had poor help
Yep.
in the past. I really am focused on here this in the next month or two before their mom makes it heads back to Hawaii. What can be done from a clean, really from a clean slate type place? Because I don't have, I've let the whatever, the terrible comments they've made to me, they're whatever, all that stuff I've let go. How do I help them? But with the amount of baggage that they're holding, how do you draw somebody into that place?
Yeah. So the first place is being unattached.
Hmm.
You don't know
Yeah.
how it's going to go,
Yep.
right? You don't know what's going to happen with their baggage, but what you can do is show up clean, be
Hmm.
unattached to how it goes. And I think that that's a great question for you to explore between now and our next session is what and even at a deeper level, what type of relationship do you want to create with them over the next 2 months? That's the question to be asking yourself. And maybe it's that, hey, I want to create this relationship with them, but the reality is they're not going to talk to you.
Yeah.
but you're connected to what it is that you want to create. And then that's where you have to, again, be complete.
Hmm.
I want to create this relationship with them. I want to enroll them in that. They might not want any part of that. And my
Hmm.
work is in the moment to be complete with that.
Yeah. Yep.
But it starts with you getting clear on what it is that you want to create with them in these next 2 months. And I know
Yeah.
that, we might not have it all figured out today, but do you feel like we've got some place to sort of start this from?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and kind of where I'm at is trying to find them. I think a good place to start with them is trying to figure out a way to get them in and get them evaluated first,
Mm-hmm.
and then because if I can do that, like they've both expressed some pain that they're dealing with. And if I can go to
Mm-hmm.
them from that place of, hey, we'll talk about what baggage is between us, but let's really focus on the pain that you're feeling right now because we're not going to get any headway on our relationship with the amount of pain that they're feeling. And if I can bring it from that place of, hey, can I take you to see a doctor to see if they can help clear up some of this pain that you have,
Yeah.
and just to really show up for them and that pain that they've expressed and being present to that, then, where that goes on a big picture once they're evaluated is a whole nother question. But I think that's a good place to start on, you know, whatever, trying to get them help. The hard part is I kind of tried that with my daughter. She didn't respond to me. Their moms fight me, to do it. So it's really hard to get the girls, to get them to go, especially when their mom's claiming that they're completely mentally healthy.
Yeah. And so I would say, like, yes, you want to get them evaluated. That's the goal. But, like, what if they say no? Then what's the game
Hmm.
plan?
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things I was thinking in the past, and I'm struggling with being complete with this, I guess, is just at that point, if they refuse to get help, essentially to let them move to Hawaii and go. That's again, I think part of what I need to do in all these things is quit being such a critic of myself. Could I do more? Maybe, but to what extent? I mean,
Yeah.
how much
Okay.
effort am I going to put in that?
Let me offer you something here, just based again and based on time, because I do got to jump here. But I would say that, like, notice this pattern, right? Because, like, yes, you want them to go see a doctor. And if they're a no to that, you're kind of in that space of like, well, there's really nothing else I can do. I'm going to let them go to Hawaii. Again, totally get that. But, like, take a step back, right? If they don't want to go see the doctor, that's your cue that they're not enrolled. There's
Hmm.
probably an opportunity to take that step back and be like, you know what? If they don't want to go see the doctor in this exact moment, what if we just meet up for a cup of coffee?
Hmm.
I know they don't drink coffee, but what if we
Yeah,
just
but
meet
right.
up and be connected to each other and let me just hear what they have to say? And if they don't even want to connect with you at that level, then, again, okay, well, that's where you need to look at, completion for that, right? But it's like taking that step back and just being focused on the connection piece in this moment and see what gets
And
created from
that's
that.
Yeah, and then that's where I mean I did message him I think last week and just said, "Hey, you don't want to come
Yeah.
here. Could we get together, do
Yeah.
something, go for a walk, something?" And there was no response. So, I mean,
Sure.
I definitely need to follow up and put a little more pressure
Yes.
there. Um, and that's kind of where I'm starting to, like you said, kind of get to that completion of like, okay, I mean, I'm trying. And at the end of the day, I mean, short of going in there and, dragging them out of the house, there's not much you
Absolutely.
can do. There's no
Yeah.
enrollment. And so at what point I mean, you have to, if there's zero enrollment, then you have very
Yes.
little to work from.
Exactly.
If there's no respect to the leadership, no enrollment, what do you have?
For sure. For sure. Okay, so you've got your two practices for this week. One, doing the 13 questions for completion with
Hmm.
regards to other. how others have been in relationship with you. You could focus on one specific area, i.e., like the therapist or your ex-wife with regards to your daughters, or you could go more generalized. Okay. That's
Yep.
practice number one. Practice number two is getting connected to the relationship that you want to create with your daughters over the next 1 to 2 months. One thing I would invite you to in that is you might want to separate it too, instead of it just being like a generalized approach, maybe specifics based on each daughter.
Okay. And so it was that you said create a list or
Yeah. Yeah. Just
establish.
what's the relationship that you want to create with your daughters between in the next 1 to 2 months? And, an added bonus to that could be like, how will you be complete?
Mhm.
What needs, where would you need to be at? What would need to occur in the next 1 to 2 months for you to actually, that we could actually project, not project, but we could foresee that 2 months from now, you're not left standing there with regret and guilt, but you're actually like, you know what? I'm good. I'm complete. I'm complete with whatever got created here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome, man. I got to jump.
Yeah. Can you email those practices to me? Just so
Yeah.
I fully understand. I'm trying to
Yeah,
write
yeah,
them
for
down,
sure.
but I feel like I'm got
Yeah,
chicken
sounds
scratches
good.
I don't fully understand. So
Okay, man. Sounds great.
yeah,
You have a good rest of
perfect.
your
So
day.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay,
Have a good day.
bye.